The clock reads 4:47 a.m. when the first server goes dark. Not with an alarm, not with a warning, just a silent drop into oblivion, as if someone pulled the plug on reality itself. In a data center outside Virginia, rows of blinking lights suddenly freeze, then die. Within seconds, the cascade begins. Chicago, Atlanta, Denver, Los Angeles. One by one, the digital arteries that pump life through the nation begin to clot. The operators stare at their screens, watching infrastructure vanish like stars blinking out at dawn. They reach for phones that no longer connect. They type commands that no longer execute. And in that moment, in the space between heartbeat and breath, the United States steps off a cliff it didn't know existed. By 5:13 a.m., the first civilians notice something wrong. A woman in Philadelphia tries to check her bank balance. The app spins endlessly, a wheel turning nowhere. A man in Phoenix attempts to start his car, but the smart ignition system refuses to recognize his key fob. Traffic lights in Seattle flash yellow, then red, then nothing at all. The city holds its breath at 1,000 intersections, waiting for order that will never return. These are not glitches. These are symptoms. The code that invaded the nation's networks spent 6 months learning every pathway, every vulnerability, every trusted connection. It mapped the invisible architecture of American life with surgical precision. And now, at exactly 5:34 a.m. Eastern Time, it executes a single devastating command. Shut down everything. The attack spreads faster than understanding. Payment processors collapse first, taking with them every credit card transaction, every digital wallet, every electronic transfer. ATMs display uniform messages across 50 states. Temporarily unavailable. Try again later, but there is no later. The banking system doesn't freeze, it evaporates. In kitchens and bedrooms, people refresh their screens compulsively, believing the problem exists in their devices, not in the world. They restart phones. They check Wi-Fi routers. They blame their service providers. The truth hasn't reached them yet. When it does, it will arrive not as information, but as absence. At 6:02 a.m., the power grid begins its death spiral. Electrical substations operate on automated systems, software that balances load and manages distribution across millions of miles of wire. Those systems stop responding to commands. Engineers watch in horror as circuit breakers refuse to open, transformers overheat without triggering safety protocols, and entire regions go dark not from physical damage, but from digital paralysis. The lights don't flicker, they simply cease. In hospitals, backup generators roar to life, buying time measured in hours, not days. In homes, refrigerators fall silent. Alarm clocks go dark. The constant hum of modern existence, so familiar it became invisible, disappears. And in that sudden quiet, fear finds its voice. Emergency call centers light up like Christmas trees. Dispatchers answer a flood of panicked voices. My power is out. My car won't start. I can't reach my family. The ATM ate my card. But the dispatchers have no answers. Their own systems are failing in real time. Computer-aided dispatch software crashes. GPS tracking for emergency vehicles stops updating. The digital maps that guide ambulances and fire trucks to addresses vanish, leaving first responders with paper laces from another era. Some departments still have them. Most don't. The calls keep coming. The hold times stretch into minutes, then tens of minutes. And slowly, people stop calling. Not because the crisis has passed, but because they realize no one is coming. By 7:30 a.m., the morning commute transforms into a nightmare. Traffic lights remain dead across major metropolitan areas. At first, drivers treat intersections like four-way stops, tentatively taking turns. But as volume increases and patience evaporates, order collapses. Gridlock spreads like disease. Cars angle across lanes, trapped by vehicles ahead and behind. Drivers abandon their cars in the middle of highways, choosing to walk rather than sit in automotive coffins. The GPS apps they've depended on for a decade are gone. Blue dots no longer trace their positions. Routes no longer calculate. They navigate by sun and memory, or they don't navigate at all. Airports shut down with brutal efficiency. The Federal Aviation Administration grounds every aircraft. Planes in the sky receive emergency orders to land immediately at the nearest suitable runway. Radar systems flicker and fail. Communication between pilots and control towers degrades into static-filled chaos. In terminals, electronic departure boards go blank. Automated check and kiosks freeze mid-transaction. The facial recognition gates that streamline security now stand as useless monuments to a vanished age. Thousands of travelers find themselves stranded in buildings where air conditioning fails, where payment systems die, where information comes only through rumor and speculation. The questions echo through concourses. What's happening? When will it be fixed? Is it terrorism? No one knows. No one can know. The networks that carried news have collapsed along with everything else. Cell towers began their slow death at 8:15 a.m. The attack doesn't destroy the physical infrastructure. It corrupts the software that manages it. Towers lose their ability to route calls, to maintain connections, to distinguish signal from noise. Phones show full bars that mean nothing. Calls connect for seconds before dropping into void. Text messages sit unset in digital purgatory. Social media apps open to cached content from hours ago, frozen moments from a world that no longer exists. People stand on street corners holding devices skyward, searching for signal like ancient humans searching for rain. The isolation sets in fast. Without phones, without internet, without any way to reach beyond arm's length, millions of people become islands. They cannot confirm their families are safe. They cannot learn what is happening beyond their immediate view. They cannot coordinate, plan, or prepare. They can only wait and wonder. The first supply chain failures manifest before noon. Delivery trucks that run on digital logistics platforms sit idle in distribution centers. Drivers have no manifests, no routes, no authorization codes to access fuel pumps or loading docks. The just-in-time inventory system that keeps store shelves stocked assumes constant communication and precise coordination. That assumption shatters. Supermarkets receive no deliveries. Pharmacies get no restocks. Gas stations cannot order fuel. The supply exists somewhere in the vast network of American commerce, but without digital threads connecting need to resource, it might as well be on another planet. Store managers make desperate calculations. They can sell what they have on hand, but only if they can process transactions. Most point-of-sale systems are dead. A few try cash-only operations, but cashiers haven't counted change manually in years. The lines grow longer. The patience grows thinner. By early afternoon, the reality settles like ash. This is not a temporary glitch. This is not a regional outage. This is nationwide, systematic, and total. The federal government attempts to communicate through emergency broadcast systems, but those systems rely on networks now compromised. A few radio stations with backup power and older equipment manage to stay on air, but their reach is limited. They become islands of information in a sea of silence. The messages they broadcast are vague and unhelpful. Stay calm, stay home, await further instructions. But people need more than platitudes. They need water, they need food, they need medicine, and they need to know when the world will start working again. Water pressure drops first in cities with fully automated treatment plants. Pumps stop responding. Chemical dosing systems fail to maintain safe levels of chlorine and fluoride. Reservoirs begin to drain without fresh water flowing in to replace what's consumed. Some households notice immediately. Others don't realize until they turn on faucets and hear the coughing sputter of air in pipes. Those who understand what's happening fill bathtubs, pots, bottles, anything that holds liquid. Those who don't wait for normal to return. By evening, municipal authorities issue warnings. Boil water before drinking. But many homes lack power to boil anything. The warnings come through word of mouth, through handwritten signs posted on community boards, through neighbors knocking on doors. The infrastructure of information has reverted to the speed of footsteps. The sun sets on hour 12, and darkness brings a new dimension of fear. Without streetlights, cities plunge into blackness broken only by car headlights and the occasional glow of a generator-powered home. The darkness is absolute in ways most Americans have never experienced. No light pollution, no ambient glow, just the stars and the moon and the profound absence of electricity. In that darkness, crime finds opportunity. Pharmacy windows shatter. Convenience stores are forced open. The looting starts small and scattered, driven more by desperation than malice. A mother needs baby formula. A diabetic needs insulin. A family needs food. But desperation and opportunism look the same in the dark. Police departments, already overwhelmed and communication impaired, cannot respond to every break-in, every theft, every act of violence. They prioritize, they triage, and many calls simply go unanswered. Neighborhoods begin to self-organize. Apartment buildings elect floor captains. Suburban streets form watch groups. People who never spoke to their neighbors suddenly depend on them for information, resources, and safety. Some communities adapt quickly, pooling resources and establishing systems for shared security and rationing. Others fracture along existing fault lines, suspicion replacing solidarity. The difference between the two often comes down to a single variable: leadership. A retired Marine who organizes a block watch. A nurse who establishes a first aid station in her garage. A teacher who coordinates childcare so parents can search for supplies. These ordinary people become the infrastructure that replaces the digital systems now dead. By the end of day one, the psychological shift is complete. The world has divided into before and after. Before, when order was assumed and convenience was reality. After, when every resource is finite and every interaction carries weight. People who went to bed in one world wake in another. The transition happens without ceremony, without declaration. It simply is. And as the first day ends, a new and terrible question forms in millions of minds simultaneously. What happens tomorrow? Day 2 dawns on a nation in shock. The sun rises over cities where smoke from fires drifts through empty streets. Over highways littered with abandoned vehicles. Over homes where families ration the last of their perishable food and wonder when help will arrive. The federal government, paralyzed by the same attack that crippled everything else, struggles to coordinate response. Command centers revert to analog communication. Shortwave radios, satellite phones, handwritten orders carried by runners. The machinery of government still exists, but it moves at the speed of the pre-digital age. Too slow for the crisis unfolding in real time. Hospitals cross the threshold from crisis to catastrophe. Backup generators were designed for short-term outages, not sustained operational loads. Fuel reserves deplete. Administrators face impossible choices. Which departments get power? Which patients get care? Ventilators run until they don't. Dialysis machines fail. Refrigerated medications spoil. Nurses manually ventilate patients using bag valve masks, trading off every few minutes to avoid exhaustion. Doctors perform surgeries without electronic monitors, relying on observation and instinct. The emergency rooms overflow with trauma, with complications from chronic conditions, with infections that spiral without antibiotics. And still the patients come, carried by family members on foot, because ambulances cannot navigate the gridlocked streets. The water situation degrades from problem to emergency. Treatment plants without automation cannot maintain safe processing. Raw sewage begins backing up in systems designed to operate automatically. Contamination spreads. Health departments issue warnings to boil all water, but compliance is impossible without power. Residents in apartment buildings face the additional challenge of pumps that no longer lift water to upper floors. They descend to street level carrying containers, forming lines at functional hydrants and public fountains. Fights break out over position in line, over accusations of taking too much, over nothing and everything. The civility that held society together requires the assumption of abundance. When that assumption dies, so does civility. Food becomes currency. The supermarkets that attempted to stay open on day one close on day two, their shelves stripped bare. Not by greed, but by need multiplied by millions. The average American household keeps 3 days of food in reserve. By day two, most are already rationing. Those who prepared, who maintained pantries, stocked with rice, beans, canned goods, pasta, find themselves targets. Desperation drives people to knock on doors, to ask, then to demand. Some share, some refuse. Some lie and say they have nothing. The ethics of survival are situational and ugly. The economic damage, though invisible in the immediate chaos, is catastrophic. Financial markets cannot open. Electronic trading is impossible. Banks cannot process transactions, cannot verify accounts, cannot restore access to digital wealth. For all practical purposes, money that exists only as numbers in databases has ceased to exist at all. The global economy, deeply integrated with American systems, begins to seize. International shipping halts. Currency exchanges freeze. The interconnected web of trade and finance that spans continents unravels thread by thread. The damage will take years to calculate and decades to repair. Government attempts to restore order focus on critical infrastructure first: power plants, water facilities, communication hubs. Military cyber units work to isolate infected systems, to purge malicious code, to rebuild from clean backups where they exist. But the attack was sophisticated. It didn't simply destroy, it corrupted. Code that appears clean contains hidden triggers. Systems that seem restored fail again hours after coming online. The attackers, whoever they are, built redundancy into their weapon. Killing it once is not enough. It must be killed completely, and that takes time no one has. The National Guard deploys to major cities, but their effectiveness is limited. They can establish checkpoints. They can distribute what supplies exist. They can provide visible security, but they cannot restore electricity. They cannot make water safe. They cannot bring back the digital systems that governed every aspect of modern life. Their presence provides psychological comfort more than practical aid, a reminder that some form of government still functions, even if it cannot yet solve the crisis. Day two ends with the realization that recovery is not imminent. The initial hope, the assumption that power would return within hours, that this was temporary, dies hard. In its place grows a grimmer understanding. This will take days, perhaps weeks, perhaps longer. The preparations people make on day two reflect that understanding. They stop waiting and start adapting. They form networks. They establish barter systems. They organize security and resource distribution. They begin, in small and tentative ways, to build a new social order on the ruins of the old. Day three arrives with the sun, but without hope. The pattern is set now. The crisis is not escalating. It is entrenched. The shock has worn away, leaving only the hard work of survival. Cities that were chaotic are now reorganized into smaller units, neighborhoods, blocks, buildings, each operating independently, connected by foot messengers and word of mouth. The centralized systems that governed American life have collapsed. In their place, 1,000 small communities make their own rules. The death toll begins to climb, though no one can count it accurately. Hospitals, overwhelmed and under-resourced, lose patients they would have saved in normal times. Diabetics run out of insulin. Heart patients cannot access medication. Dialysis patients go into crisis. The elderly, isolated and unable to adapt quickly, suffer disproportionately. Heat stroke in southern states. Dehydration everywhere. Infections from contaminated water. Violence from confrontations over resources. Each death is a tragedy. Each death is also invisible, unrecorded, unmourned, beyond immediate family. The systems that tracked mortality are gone. Societal fractures widen. The division between those who prepared and those who didn't becomes a chasm. Preppers, once mocked as paranoid extremists, find their foresight validated. They have water filters, hand crank radios, stored food, first aid supplies, and most importantly, the mindset to function without infrastructure. They become leaders, advisors, and sometimes warlords. Others, dependent on systems now dead, must learn rapidly or perish. The learning curve is steep and unforgiving. Communication remains the central challenge. Without phones, without internet, without any real-time method of coordination, rumors fill the void. Some neighborhoods believe the attack is over, that restoration is imminent. Others think it's the beginning of invasion. Conspiracy theories spread faster than facts because facts require verification, and verification requires communication. The information landscape becomes toxic, every claim suspect, every assurance doubted. In the absence of trusted sources, people believe what they want to believe, and what they want to believe is usually the worst. Even in darkness, grace appears. Neighbors share food, volunteers watch children, makeshift schools rise, and medical students open aid stations with donated supplies. These acts do not restore power or the internet, but they prove humanity persists when systems fail. By day 3, reality sets in. The old world will not return soon. Infrastructure for 330 million is shattered. Survival is the present crisis. Reconstruction is the future. The lesson is harsh. Modern life rests on fragile foundations. Digital comfort creates vast vulnerability. Interdependence becomes a single point of failure. In crisis, analog skills matter: navigation without GPS, communication without phones, coordination without internet, first aid without hospitals, water without plants. Preparedness is responsibility. 2 weeks of food and water, tools, first aid knowledge, community ties, and fitness can mean walking home and living. At 72 hours, America exists between nations. Laws remain, but power is local. Whoever controls resources shapes outcomes. For now, communities endure. The attack will be studied later. Today is water, food, safety one more day. What seemed permanent was conditional on electricity and code. The old world is gone. Survival is the only victory. Civilization is not a state. It is a process, and it can stop now.